I'll probably repeat what I'm about to say, but folks, this school is just about to become Georgia State, like in about 6 weeks or so. And I went to a big state university, UT. They expect things to be different, particularly the testing. They tend to frown on multiple choice tests as being somewhat primitive. So what I'm going to do is an option. In the place of the regular test, I'm going to ask you to write a 2-page essay. And unlike what I've done before, the essay will be about stuff we've gone over in class, but I'm not going to tell you what the essay is. Now, actually, I'm going to pick about 4 questions, say write on one of them. This is what my professors did when I was at UT. 4 questions, and you write on one of them. Now, that's optional. Otherwise, you can just take the regular old multiple choice test I've been giving off and on for years. Why am I doing this again? My daughter is going to the big university. That's why I was doing the Snellville. I was taking her back home back to the university after the vacation. So I passed through Snellville, which is about 10 miles out of the way. But anyway, took her back, but I had to talk with her about the history course she was taking. Said, you can't study for it the old way. You get an advanced history course. They want you to be able to reason and to do it without warning, without being told ahead of time what's on it. To do some inductive, deductive reasoning, and to defend your answer, to take a position on a topic, and give facts to support that topic. This is big university folk. Hopefully you'll appreciate the difference someday. I'm going to attempt it because what Georgia Perimeter has done, I'm afraid won't quite cut it when they start looking over my shoulder and going, hey, how do you teach? Let me see some examples of your testing. And nobody knows what will happen, but I'm going to give an optional essay. Okay, any questions? I mean, don't ask what the questions are. Something that will involve reasoning. All right. Having said that, I will proceed. Yes. Well, no, wait a minute. No, I've got a couple of minutes. Since I got here at 6 o'clock this morning, I had a lot of time to do some research, and one of the things I happened to bump into is that in what used to be the former Soviet province of Kazakhstan, they've discovered something that can only be seen from space, a whole bunch of disks arranged in straight lines where they cross going across it. That has to be artificial. Some of them even have a swastika. They've discovered many of these. I mean, I just thought I'd throw that in. It won't be part of your lesson, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but it's some new discovery. If you really look for it, folks, all your life, you're going to be hearing about what I said, how the ancients did some things that astounded us. And we thought these people living in Kazakhstan were nomadic peoples and have always been. But it looks like some of them were super highly advanced at one time. Then I ran into something else I thought most intriguing, and this does have something to do with today's lesson. The big Antarctic ice sheet that's supposed to be melting and raising the ocean levels, NASA says the Antarctic ice sheet is actually increasing in size, which might be indicative of a coming cooling. All right, what does this have to do with today's lesson? Simply this. It appears that around the year 100, 200, and 300, the Earth experienced a cooling. And persons who have studied comparative history notice that in Europe In India and in China, their civilization underwent a drastic decline. Now, what about the North American Indians? We don't know about them, regretfully. Now, we do know about them later. In the 1600s, when the world experienced another little ice age, a lot of the North American Indians almost died out, and many Indian tribes became extinct. In other words, what I'm getting at is these things of warming and cooling go in natural cycles, and man has no control over them, and they're not caused by anything man does. In fact, we really don't know what causes them. Something way down deep in the earth that may bring about an El Nino, or maybe it's the sun, but something bigger than man's putting out more carbon dioxide. All right. Hey, if any of you... The thing about the global, the ice sheet, you can find by going to www.msn.com. It's made world news. The ice sheet, NASA says, is actually expanding, which means the oceans are not filling up with melted ice from Antarctica. All right. China, we've talked about the Han Dynasty, and after the Han Dynasty came the era they call the era of 6 dynasties. It was a time of chaos. During this time of chaos, the Mongolians came down. The Mongolians come down from the north several times. They took over northern China. Then southern China remained free from the Mongolians, but they were not united. They had, a bunch of dynasties that would rule simultaneously. First one, then another, then another, then another. After several hundred years of this chaos, a dynasty came along around the 9 or 1000s, I don't know the exact date, called the Sui. And they united China and brought order out of the chaos. Unfortunately, the Sui dynasty did not last long, and chaos ensued again. The second ruler of the Sui dynasty was harsh and corrupt, and the Chinese rebelled against him and overthrew that dynasty. For a time, for 2 generations, there was no strong dynasty. Then along came the Sung. That looks like Song, but I believe it's pronounced Sung. If any of you know any different. Song? Song. Okay, thank you. All right. The Song dynasty. The Song dynasty came along, and they lasted some 300 years, and they kept China united. Now, they had a problem. I mean, all these dynasties have their strengths and weaknesses. The Sung dynasty, all right, what comes across to me is it looks like a socialistic dynasty. They tried to help the poor. Helping the poor sounds like noble, and it is a noble thing for you to do as individuals. Personally, I believe the government has no business at all doing 2 things that our governments today are doing. Number 1 is educating children. Number 2 is helping the poor. That's not the job of the government. What's the government supposed to do? Protect us from our enemies without and protect us from criminals from within. And our government today doesn't appear to be doing a very good job of either one. But this dynasty is somewhat of a socialistic dynasty, tried to help the poor, and also during that time they prospered, and a lot of inventions were made. But they were militarily weak. They just didn't realize the need for them. I mean, a lot of times the liberal people, to me the Sung dynasty comes across as being liberal. They hate the whole idea of war. Hey, I hate it too. During this time, while this dynasty had conquered Tibet, they lost Tibet. But then worse than that, after 300 years, the Mongolians came down and conquered them. Actually, wait, okay. I got them backwards, folk. My apologies. The Tang came first. Then the Song, Tang. Let's see, militarily weak. Tang Dynasty was a dynasty the Chinese often look back to as their glory days. Again, though, to me, they made the mistake of trying to help the poor. Their attempts to help the poor resulted in economic collapse and miserable failure. You might say, what's wrong with helping the poor? It's not the government's job. It's a job of each of us as individuals. Yes, but the government, never. All right, I've been called opinionated. Maybe you feel differently about it. But nevertheless, yeah, it's the government's job to create conditions to where a person can become rich if he wants to. By fighting criminals, by fighting enemies abroad, by maintaining the peace, but helping the poor. Oftentimes, the only way the government helps the poor is by robbing the rich, taking money from the wealthy and redistributing it. With the result, it's the rich don't have incentive to get richer, and everybody gets poorer in the pile. Anyway, the Song Dynasty was conquered by the Mongolians, led by Genghis Khan. Now, Genghis Khan himself he did not conquer all of China. He began to conquer it. His grandson Kublai Khan completed the job of conquering China. Now, Kublai Khan is one we remember because during his reign, Marco Polo came from Italy and went back to Europe and wrote a book about how they'd met the great Khan and how rich the great Khan was and how mighty his empire was. Kublai Khan was Genghis Khan's grandson. Now, folks, Genghis Khan never had an army of more than 100,000 men, even though they were highly trained, highly skilled warriors who fought from horseback. The fact is, China would never have been conquered by the Mongolians if they had maintained a strong military presence and a highly trained military, because China had multiplied millions of people. Genghis Khan realized that their emperor was weak, their army was weak when it should have been strong, and they came in and took over. All right. Basically, this is a political history summed up in brief. These dynasties, one after another, then this chapter ends around the year 1400. Now, the Mongolians, when they came in, they used gunpowder. Gunpowder had been invented by the Chinese during I believe during the Sung Dynasty, remember the Tang, and the Chinese taught its use to the Mongolians, and the Mongolians used it against China. They had used gunpowder in a form of artillery, something that resembled crude cannon, and what we might today call hand grenades. Devices loaded with gunpowder, they'd throw it at the enemy and these devices would blow up, very similar to our hand grenade, but not quite as sophisticated. Now, while all of this was going on politically, and again, I'm going by the way the book teaches it, so there are other things going on religiously and politically. For those of you who are going to take the real test, I want to clarify something. During India's history, Hinduism has actually been the dominant religion. Now, Buddhism threatened. Same with China, except that in China, Confucianism always was the dominant religion. Even though Buddhism and Taoism threatened at times, nevertheless, the main religion always wound up being in the lead, and it always came out on top. Partly but the threats forced these religions to make some adaptations. In the case of Hinduism, they had to become more egalitarian and include more of the lower caste. In the case of Confucianism, they had to become more spiritual to compete with the more spiritual Buddhism and more spiritual Taoism. Now, the Sung dynasty was able to reinstate the civil service exams. The civil service exams were exams that were taken to try to determine who would get the government positions. And Europe didn't have anything like it until the 1700s. And the United States used to use them, but generally uses merit anymore. In other words, if you do well on this level, you get promoted to the next. But the Chinese set up a civil service exam, and part of the reason for this was so the emperors would have more control over who got the government positions. Rather than having to pick the son of the oldest son of the nobleman who had held a position before, they wanted to say a lot of oldest sons are not qualified, not capable, incompetent. We want to make sure that only a qualified, capable, competent person gets to take the test and gets to take the exams. The emperor's relatives were not allowed to take the exam. They thought this was unfair. There were several things wrong with the exams. Number one, because there were no public schools in China, it was difficult for an ordinary person to pass them. Now, there were cases where you had an extremely brilliant young boy whose brilliance showed up by maybe the mayor of the town, and he would decide, I'm going to educate this fellow. And a few people like that did move up. But for the most part, the ordinary person whose parents could not afford to hire tutors or send their kid to a private school had no chance to take and pass the exam. Eunuchs were not allowed to take it. The exams consist of 3 levels. If you passed level 1, you were qualified for a local job. If you passed level 2, you were qualified, you might say, for a state job. If you passed level 3, if you were qualified, I'll call it a federal job. In other words, local, state, and federal. I mean, that's using 21st century American terms, but that was a basic idea. 3 exams. The first exam, if you passed it, you were qualified on a lower level, and then passed the second one for an intermediate level. Passed the 3rd exam, you were qualified for a high exam. It is known that there was sometimes cheating on the exam. Now, something else about the exams, folk. Now, before I start with this, I want to tell you, I'm about to say something that didn't really get me in trouble. I said this to a class many years ago, and someone went right straight to the department head and told on me. Fine and dandy. Our present department head, Mario Bennick, said we have the freedom to say anything we want to. And believe me, I do try to be careful what I say. Here's what he told me. All right, here's what I said. In medieval China, the exams were slanted towards Confucianism. That's in your book. What does that have to do with 21st century America? We have to take tests, determine our readiness for graduate school or for the national. Particularly, I'm thinking of 2 tests, like a graduate record exam and a national teacher's exam. And folk, now here's what got me not in trouble about a note from my department head at that time. These exams are slanted toward the left. I'm talking 20th, 21st century America. I've taken them. They're slanted hard toward liberalism and toward the left. And if they've changed any, I haven't heard it about it. So we're doing the same thing to try to make sure that everybody who gets high up in academia, the ones who get the tenured faculty, are mostly leftist. Mostly liberal. Duke University has 50-some history professors. Every one of them is a liberal Democrat. And you know, if they have any comments. But basically what I'm saying, we're doing the same thing with it. All right, back to China. They slanted their exams toward Confucians. And in order to pass the exam, you had to memorize a large portion of Confucian writings. Occasionally, they put a Buddhist question in the exam. And if passing the exam did not mean you were automatically in a government position, there had to be a position open. It's like in the Army. If you're a captain, you must immediately qualify to become a major. But there's there's no guarantee you'll become a major. There has to be some major retire or get promoted or somehow leave the Army. There has to be an opening. And if there's no opening, then you won't get the promotion. And anyway, something else I must say about the exams. Only men were allowed to take them. Women were not. And this was to remain true for much of China's history. On the government, about the government, the local level was the village, and a lot of Chinese life centered around the village. And a lot of emperors would leave the villages alone as long as the village paid its taxes to the central government. They'd leave the village alone and let the village govern itself a lot of times. But most Chinese people had no role in government, but the ones who did have was usually through the villages. The village was the center of Chinese life. China remained an agricultural society, and this was to remain true of a lot of the ancient medieval world. It took 90% of people being farmers to feed the other 10%. And this was before the invention of the tractor, the combine, and the reaper, of course. And by the way, those inventions have made no headway in China because rice farming simply, we don't have machines that can do it. Our tractors, combines, reapers, all this are ineffective when it comes to rice farming. Rice remained their number one crop. The land, in spite of all the emperor's attempts to stop it, the land in China would find its way in the hands of a few wealthy. Occasionally, an emperor would come in who would redistribute the land among everybody, but in spite of all this, the land would still find its way once again into the hands of a few wealthy, and your average Chinese person wound up being reduced to either serfdom or slavery. The Tang dynasty here tried to redistribute the land. They took land from the wealthy, distributed among the poor, but it worked. In this case, it worked for a short time, but eventually the nobility found a way around it, and eventually the whole system of redistribution was abandoned. Land again found its way into the hands of a few very wealthy. The poor finally rose up and revolted. During the time of the Song, they also tried to help the poor, as I've mentioned, but their policies did not work. But what did help the poor more than anything else was better methods of farming, better farming techniques and inventions did a lot. China also tended to become more urban as trade and industry became more of a feature of Chinese economy. They began to grow cotton. Yeah, one of the several inventions, cotton, and make steel. Steel is made by mixing iron with some other elements, most notably magnesium. Steel was to lead to the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s when they found a cheap way to produce a lot of it. Structural steel gave rise to skyscrapers, to bridges that could span the Mississippi. You cannot build a bridge across the Mississippi made out of wood, not easily, wood and stone. But with steel, structural steel, they were able to do it. Steel is stronger than iron and yet much lighter than iron, less prone to rust, and in general better than iron. And it's used in the making of automobiles, locomotives, and any more ships. And it can be made, you can harden it to a certain hardness or to where it's hard and brittle, or to another hardness where it will easily bend. You can make springs out of it. It's very versatile. Now, they also set up a system of banks, paper money, and credit. 3 words, folks, that describe it. I'm listing something as banks, paper money, and credit. Maybe you just take these things for granted. But these things is something you must have in order to have a complex economy. Must have. Well, why? All right, let me remind me. I spent 27 years at Lockheed. Supposing there had been no bank, and Lockheed could only pay its workers when it sold a plane. Well, during the time I was there, sometimes they go for months without. We had planes, we built about 8 or 10 of them, and couldn't sell them because there was some fault with them that took our engineers weeks to iron out. Some little fault, actually some major fault with this one part of the propeller. You may not know, but these propellers could be twisted this way and that, but there was a glitch in them, which eventually was ironed out. But during that time, supposing that Lockheed did not have credit with the local banks, that meant that we employees would have to work for maybe 6, 7 months without getting paid. Then when Lockheed finally got the problem solved and sold the planes, we'd all get 8 months worth of back pay. I mean, the result would have been just economic chaos. I mean, just as it was, Lockheed was able to beat payroll every week because they did this is credit. Again, when you're making something like an airplane, you make your money in huge chunks. When you're making something like washcloths, you make your money pretty regular and steady income. Airplane factories, you're not making, but what I'm saying, you can't have an airplane factory without banks being set up first. Credit, maybe you take a person's promise to pay. Now, basically, folks, the thing I'm saying is the Chinese are on their way to developing. Between steel, banks, all the printing press, gunpowder, I mean, the rudder, the wheelbarrow, they were on their way to building the best society man had ever seen, but somewhere along the way they got hijacked. No, actually, they didn't get hijacked by outsiders. They hijacked themselves. The Silk Road was still in operation, but very little trade was made with Europe. Europeans were too poor at this point, didn't have enough gold and silver to buy Chinese products. So the Chinese began trading with the Muslim world. Now this has become very important in American history later because the Muslim world lay between Europe and China. And Europeans, once they got gold, had to figure out how to get to China. That's why Columbus decided, hey, I can sail west. He sailed west and up to the American continents. That was another story. But also why the Portuguese decided the best way to get to China was to go around Africa. The idea was to bypass the Muslim world and go to China directly, and eventually Europeans did. But during this period of time we're talking about the 10 and 1100s, 8, 900s, there was very little trade with Europe, but they were trading with Muslims. Land trade was very dangerous owing to bandits, mountains that were difficult to cross, deserts, a lot of mountains, a lot of bandits. So the Chinese resorted to sea trade, and folk, it is believed that the Chinese built some 450-foot long wooden sailing vessels. Some of them had 8 or 10 masts, one after another. I say it's believed because you can't actually prove it. The only thing we found of these vessels is a rudder, but the rudder is so big that it probably had to have been used on a 450-foot vessel. But these vessels were all destroyed. Now, it's believed also, well, it's actually known, that Chinese sailors went to Africa, and one of them brought back giraffes, which the emperor was highly impressed with. They bought African elephants and giraffes and African tigers and so on, and kept them in the Beijing Zoo for several years. But they built huge sailing vessels, and it's also known they went to California. Well, in other words, they were in California some 50 years before Columbus. Well, what happened? Well, that's what I'll get to in a little bit. One of my daughters pointed out that the distance from China to California is more than twice the distance from Europe to the east coast of the United States. From Europe, from Portugal to, let's say, New Jersey is only about 4,000 miles. From California to China is some 10,000 miles. So quite a bit of difference there. Nevertheless, Chinese traders went, I mean, they went as far as possibly, probably went to Australia. They went to the South Sea Islands and brought back a lot of grapes, walnuts, pomegranates, in addition to tea, silk, porcelain, silk. Porcelain, of course, is used in small dishes or teacups. It's good at holding heat in for a while. And also in electronics, it's used to make capacitors. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Porcelain capacitors are popular. Yes?
A lot of their old china, like the teacups and everything.
Yes.
They'll sell on retail for thousands of dollars, just the little cups, not the set, because of the actual fine material that they're made with.
Oh.
My cousin, she owns an antique shop.
Yeah.
She bought one for like $5,000.
A little bit beyond my price range, but I understand. Yeah, I understand, because it's the value of it, the high. But what I'm getting at, folk, these people were on the verge of bursting out the seams and overspreading the whole globe, and we should all be speaking Chinese. I mean, they had the potential right here to conquer the world. They didn't. They got so far and quit. Now, as to why, that's a topic I'm going to save for a little bit. China then began to have more industrialists, merchants, and artisans, in spite of the fact that their philosophers frowned on it. But some of them began to see that, hey, being a merchant is a way to make money. Being an industrialist is a way to improve the quality of everybody's life. A new group of rich people came in, and they overthrew the old nobility and took over the duties of the old nobility. Now, the family life. The family was the basic unit of life, but as was the case before, the family consisted of everybody who was descended from the same great-great-grandparents. In other words, your first cousins, second cousins, third cousins, you were considered family if you were descended on your male line. I mean, you might say, hey, I have 8 great-grandfathers and 8 great-grandmothers. That's true, but it's only your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather. Everybody who was descended from the same great-great-grandfather on your father's side was part of your family. So the family was extended. Now, the males were very dominant. Females were considered to be inferior to men. I mean, folks, this is their way of looking at things. And I think that this is one of the reasons that China did not advance higher than it did. It had, as in most societies, a long view of its women. And I'm not the first person to say that. Now, in times of famine, female babies were often killed. This is a practice that has been repeated in the 20th century. In the 20th century, owing to what China considered overpopulation, the government limited its families, the number of babies a couple could have, to 1 baby per child, to 1 baby per couple. Now, by the way, it's just been less than a week ago this was changed. Chinese couples are now allowed to have 2 babies as of about a few days ago. But Chinese were only allowed to have 1 couple, and because they wanted to carry on the family name, if the baby were a girl, they would oftentimes kill the girl. And what happened was a lot of men grew up and couldn't find wives. I mean, have any of you heard this outside here? Yeah, a few heads are nodding. Yeah, this actually went on, folk. They grew up and couldn't find wives because all the female babies had been killed, and they seem to have forgotten without female babies, they're not going to have it. They're not going to continue their family name anyway. Females were often sold as concubines or hired out as domestic servants. If the female were attractive enough to get the attention of some rich person, they would sell her as a concubine. Now, something else that they did, practice called foot binding. Foot binding was where that when a girl was about 1 year old, they'd put a very, very tight shoe on her foot to make sure her feet did not grow any bigger. The purpose of this was to make them more attractive to the men. Now, the foot binding, by the way, guaranteed that they would grow up to be crippled. But they would also change the shape of their legs, and this changing the shape of the legs was supposed to be more attractive to the Chinese men. Now, I had a 20th century American man, a few years, a 21st century man, said, I don't find crippled women attractive. I said, well, you're American and I'm American. I don't find crippled women attractive either. But the Chinese men, down for hundreds of years, found this attractive. The practice of foot binding, the authors will say that when they visited China in the 1980s, they saw some women who had their feet bound. It was finally outlawed by the communist government who took over in 1949. And one of their first acts was to outlaw foot binding. Today you don't see it as much. Now, the nearest thing we have in the West to foot binding, folk, is that American women for many generations wore high-heeled shoes. I don't see that as much anymore. I mean, I see it a little bit. The high-heeled shoes guaranteed that American women were to develop corns, bunions, plantar warts, fallen arches, and all kinds of foot problems. And 90% of American women had problems with their feet. Not the extent of China, but again, the purpose of my mother explained it. My mother wore high-heeled shoes. My sisters hardly ever do, but my mother did. She explained it was to make the women look more attractive than men. Be that as it may. Again, this is not done as much anymore, at least as far as I know it isn't. But the practice of foot binding, you won't see it anymore again because the Chinese government outlawed it. It went on in the countryside for a while. Some of the older women were hard against ending the practice. They said, hey, that's what Chinese women should have their feet bound. It makes them more subservient to the men and makes them more attractive to the men and makes them more likely to get a man. The idea was it helped to guarantee that they could get a better man or maybe a richer man when they grew up. Genghis Khan, I've mentioned him 2 or 3 times. His father was a nobleman who'd been impoverished, and in all societies, eventually, a lot of noble families lose their wealth. When Genghis Khan was 10 years old, his father was poisoned, killed, and all the members of his tribe that Genghis Khan's father had left, except for some women. So Genghis Khan had a few loyal woman followers whom he led during the time he was growing up. 11 years, 12 years, 13. At one point, in fact, he was even imprisoned. But when he grew up, he was able to, maybe you might say he was a charmer of sorts, charm his way into friendship with some key tribes, get them on his side. Then he started a program of conquest. Before it was over with, he had conquered all the tribes. And done what nobody had done in Mongolia ever before. He united all the Mongolians into one big country. Well, his followers said, you ought to conquer China. He was a little bit hesitant because he knew that China had millions of people and that China had a fairly big army. But then he got to, the more his people visited China, he said, hey, China's people are not willing to fight. The Chinese are soft and lazy. The Chinese are this, that, and the other. He finally became convinced to try. So he went to the Great Wall of China with his 100,000 men, and the Chinese at first were terrified, so they shored up the wall where he was. He marched up and down the wall, and this went on for days, and the Chinese after all became complacent. And they got to where they weren't following him. I mean, they got tired of doing maneuvers. So they just simply stayed put, and Genghis Khan noticed when he got to a gate that there weren't very many Chinese guarding the gate, so he got his 100,000 men and some battering rams, and they rammed the gate open, and he and his 100,000 men of horsemen got in. Once inside, there was no stopping him. Again, the Chinese simply were not fighters at this point. So just simply, I mean, hey, folk, a trained army is one thing. Fighting a war involves certain skills and a certain level of training and a certain level of desire to win, which the Chinese had lost. They simply were not expecting to fight a war with people as dangerous as Genghis Khan's men. Genghis Khan was able to partially conquer China. He did not completely conquer China. The Chinese did use gunpowder and crude flamethrowers, but these weapons were not effective as they might have been. Genghis Khan then did not finish conquering China. Instead, he turned his attention towards crossing the big Himalayan mountains and went into the Muslim world and just slaughtered everyone in sight. Mercilessly slaughtered the Muslim people, and he was threatening Europe. His army, some of his army crossed into Russia, and they conquered Russia. They were to hold Russia for 200 years, the Mongolians. That's a story we'll talk about later, but they had conquered Russia. Then they went on into Russia, into Poland, and there they were met by a European army. The European army battled the Mongolians to a standstill. I mean, the Europeans were more warlike and more ready to fight. They battled the Mongolians to a standstill. Then came word that Genghis Khan had died, and the Mongolian army went back to Mongolia to, to determine who the next emperor would be, or to try to make sense of the somewhat confused political situation. As for Genghis Khan himself, he did not want anybody to bother his grave. He knew that a lot of times graves of the wealthy were robbed, so the persons who buried him were all killed. And then near his gravesite, they had hundreds of thousands of horses just ride over it to where they couldn't tell which land had been freshly dug up. The fact is, nobody knows where Genghis Khan is buried. His grave has never been found. His empire was divided among his sons for a while, but in the days of his grandson Kublai Khan did not get an empire as big as his grandfather Genghis, but Kublai Khan completed the conquest of China. And he began the dynasty called the Yuan dynasty. And China was to be ruled by foreigners for some 300 or 400 years afterward under the... actually, China's been ruled by foreigners several times in our history. The Manchu ruled them. The Mongolians did for a while. The Mongolians were wise in that they allowed a lot of Chinese customs to remain intact. Kublai Khan was the emperor who was emperor when Marco Polo visited. He reported the splendor of China. But Kublai Khan did have one failure, that Chinese were never able to conquer Japan. Now, when Kublai Khan sent a fleet, a kamikaze came up. Another word for kamikaze is divine wind. Now, we're going to run into this term again. Anybody know? I mean, it's not part of the lesson, but we're going to run into this word kamikaze again. You know what, in what context? What was it?
It's World War II.
World War II. When Japan saw it was losing, they got desperate. And they began to fly their airplanes, suicide missions, smack into America. Yes?
So how was it used in this? Like,
basically,
because I doubt they were
it was not the same thing. I mean, it's the same word.
Okay.
Same word, but not the same thing. In the case of the kamikaze here, Kublai Khan sent a fleet to conquer China, and a kamikaze came up and destroyed his fleet.
So
And the fleet never reached Japan. He went to conquer Japan. But somehow or another, and I don't know the association. I know what your question
But
is.
it's a boat equivalent to a plane attack? Is that?
I don't know what the connection is, but in World War II, it's the same word. They called these suicide people kamikaze pilots, and they would try to ram their planes into American vessels and blow themselves and their planes up during World War II. Same word. Now, this reminds me of something else, too, that happened. In 1588, Spain sent a big navy to Great Britain to conquer Great Britain. And a big gale came up. And the storm was of such size it was not bothersome to the lighter, smaller English ships, but the top-heavy Spanish galleons, it was devastating, and the English were able to burn the Spanish ships one at a time while the Spanish crews were so busy trying to keep afloat. The English went in and set their ships on fire, but a wind in both cases. Japan was invaded and a wind came up and stopped the invasion. In England, the Spanish invaded, a wind came up and stopped the invasion. Japan was destined to never lose a war and to never have to surrender until 1945, when Japan had to surrender to the United States. Now, the Mongol dynasty had a problem. All these dynasties had the seeds of their own destruction. Their problem was they tried to spend money fighting foreign wars and it bankrupted them. They tried to conquer Vietnam and couldn't. Here's why. The Mongolians fought the way the Muslims did, from horseback with swords, swooping down on. That does not work in the jungle. The Vietnamese resorted to guerrilla warfare like they did against the United States, and their guerrilla warfare drove the Mongolians out. So the Mongolians temporarily conquered Vietnam, but again, they were driven out. The Mongolians' way of fighting, again, did not work against the Japanese. They sent, like I say, a bunch of ships that were destroyed by the wind. So they spent their money, though, on foreign campaigns, trying to conquer more territory, and they failed. Okay, this brings us up to Chinese in what your book calls In Search of the Way. All right, for those of you who came in late, to make this announcement again. This school is about to become part of Georgia State University, and I know that it's a big state university. They expect history teachers to give essay tests. So I'm going to try to give a couple of questions. In the place of, now you can take either in the place of the multiple choice and true-false test I'm going to give. If you think you do better writing an essay, I'll give you 4 essays to pick from. The questions will be something like, as an example, compare this and contrast that. Compare and contrast this, that. This is the type of question you'll be getting on a history courses to advance in a big university, assuming you can do advance in history in a big university. You'll be expected to notice trends or reasons, tell why something happened, or speculate on why something happened. You must write at least 2 pages to support your essay with facts. In other words, the question might be, why did Napoleon fail? It won't be on this text, obviously. And you'd be ready to, he overextended himself. He should have stayed home. He should never have gone into Russia. Eventually, people learned his tactics and learned how to fight them. Some of these reasons. And he also turned a lot of people in Europe against him as they stopped looking on him as a savior of Europe. Basically, hopefully you get the idea. There were reasons. Why did the British lose the Revolutionary War? Well, they believed that war should only be fought in the summertime and not in the winter, and the American colonists were fighting in the winter as one. The Americans received help from France for another. Spain got involved in a war with Britain. They wouldn't help the United States, but the fact is the enemy of my enemy is really my friend. So Spain, then Holland and Russia started threatening war with Britain, and Britain could not fight Spain. France, the colonies, Holland and Russia all at once. They had to give up on some wars. Basically I want you to be able to write this in an essay format. But I'm not going to tell you in advance what the questions are. That's, again, folk, if you take advanced history, they don't. And I had a long talk with my daughter. I said to her, I went to the big university and I know how they question on history tests. She was failing a history course. But it's not a matter of memorizing facts, it's a matter of noticing trends or figuring out reasons. All right. The Way, Search of the Way, the doll. Confucianism, as I've already said, remained the main religion of China throughout, but for a time they were threatened by 2 other religions, Buddhism and Taoism. Both of these religions were, you might say, more spiritual than Confucianism. And a lot of the Chinese embraced them. In fact, a lot of emperors, some of the emperors became Taoist and even open to Confucius, even though the thing that Confucius had against it was the Chinese, up until this time, generally did not accept foreign religions. Buddhism had a problem over the Chinese. Confucianism called for hard work, obedience to the government, obedience to authority. Buddhism did not call for hard work or any kind of obedience to authority. Buddhism called for contemplation, meditation, and the acceptance of what is. What will be, we can't do much about it. There was an attempt made to reconcile Buddhism with Confucianism, but the attempt failed. the Buddhists had some things about it that was simply at odds with Confucius, and Confucius had things about it that were at odds with Buddha, and simply the two of them could not unite. Well, the emperors would surround themselves with advisors, and one thing you have to understand about Chinese emperors, they were much more apt to consult with advisors than European kings. And but they generally had more Confucian advisors in their court than they did Buddhist advisors or Taoist advisors. Now, when Confucianism felt threatened by Buddhism and Taoism, Confucius began to make some changes, and the new change were called Neo-Confucianism. Neo-Confucianism never did become the official religion of China, but it did do a lot to to help guarantee that Confucianism remained the official religion of China until the year 1949, that is. The Neo-Confucianism, among other things, was more spiritual than the original Confucius. The chief philosopher that got it started was Chu Ci. Now, folk, I have done a little bit of the study of Chinese philosophies and Chinese philosophers here of late. And one of the things I noticed about them, hardly any of them were recognized as important until after they were dead. This man was actually killed by the government, as you might say Socrates was, as Jesus was. He was actually killed. And then 8 years after he was killed, he was placed in a position of honor. He wrote a lot of commentaries which were thrown out largely during his own lifetime. Then when his commentaries became the official commentaries of a lot of Chinese ancient writings. And he became honored quite a bit after he was dead, much more so than he had been while he was alive. He expounded a doctrine called Neo-Confucianism. I want to try to explain it as best I understand it. Now, folks, essentially, he said the universe was made of two halves. The one half is the material that we see, and the other half is, and I don't want to say spiritual because he wasn't convinced it was spiritual, but the other half was law, order, you might call it spiritual. And human beings resided between these two halves. And human beings would be swayed back and forth, at the time leaning toward the material and at the time leaning toward the order. He looked on the material as being the inferior and the other as being the more orderly. And he said that what we have to do is transcend the world of the material. And a way to do this is by the investigation of things. Now, he left vague as to, well, just exactly what things do you investigate? But just by the investigation of things, you could transcend the material and achieve success. Now, as far as religion was concerned, he was not a religious man. Like Confucius, he was probably an agnostic. He believed in heaven, but heaven did not have a mind. He said the earth and heaven do not have a mind. They exist, yes, but not as, in other words, they don't control things. Basically, it was just simply you have to try to, he followed the teaching of Mencius that man was basically good. Well, what about evil? Well, evil is when a person, everybody is born with basically a good nature, but there's always lurking inside a person also an evil. And you have to spend your time squelching the evil and embracing the good. And if you can completely get rid of, eradicate the evil side of you, you'll become a good person. But if you don't, you will become an evil person who will overcome the good side of yourself. So evil was where that you let the evil side of your nature triumph over the good, which would have triumphed if you had worked harder at it. Now, There was another philosopher, Yang Wangming. He believed that no, the way to happiness, the way to spiritual fulfillment was not investigating things, but investigating self, understanding self. And if you got the right control of yourself, which reminds me somewhat of Socrates, know thyself, but if you could understand the self, you would become a good person morally. Now, these Chinese philosophers emphasized morality. Now, okay. Now, I've been promising you throughout the period, I'll tell you why I think that China did not excel. A lot of persons have blamed their emperors. But then most people who have really studied the problem, in other words, why did China not invent the automobile? Why did China not invent the airplane? Why did China not invent the light bulb? Why did they not, I mean, they were on the way, folks. Why did they not put the first man on the moon? And by the way, China's working hard on putting a man on the moon. They have their own space boat that has actually succeeded in putting men into orbit. But why did China not burst out and advance and overtake the whole globe? They were on the verge of it, folk. I mean, they had set up a system. I mean, between the printing press, paper money, well, without paper money, without credit, you can't have a complex economy. There's just not enough gold and silver to go around. You have to have some form of paper money that we accept as a medium of exchange. Well, what happened? Their philosophers are blamed more than anyone else with stopping Chinese scientific growth. Their philosophers. What did the philosophers do? Well, the philosophers emphasized morality more so than making better machines, building a better clock. In the meantime, Europe, at the same time, Europeans were lagging way behind the Chinese. I mean, I'll say this, being of European descent myself. Back to the year 1000, Europeans were some of the most uncouth, dirtiest, unkempt people on the face of the globe. Fast forward 500 or 600 years, it was Europeans who burst out into the continent and spread the whole globe. Why was it not Islam? Why was it not China? Again, people blame the philosophers. Now, a couple years back, I was teaching a Friday class, and when class was over, one of my students, he was upset. We talked about an hour. He was upset. I mean, he said in his study of history, he was upset at Christianity because Christianity hindered the development of science. He pointed out the way that the church did not embrace Copernicus and the way the church persecuted Galileo. I said, yes, the church hindered, but the church did not stop. I said, look at Islam, by comparison. In Islam, their clerics completely stopped the investigation of science because it started to run counter the religious faith. Stopped it cold. In the case of China, Chinese philosophers stopped the development of the Chinese technological advance because banking and paper money was looked on as leading to greed, credit, and let's face it, folks, it's possible that you can overextend yourself and get yourself too deeply involved in debt and become impoverished. Now, sometimes it's forced on you. I mean, if you're married, you have a child, and the child becomes sick, you have to shell out thousands or tens of thousands of dollars you don't have to try to fix that child. It can happen to anyone. Or you might get hurt in an automobile accident and have to spend months in a hospital. It can happen to anyone. You can become impoverished due to no fault of your own and find yourself so deep in debt that all you can do is declare bankruptcy. Paper money, they said, leads to greed. Credit leads to dishonesty, crookedness. Banks, we must close them down because they encourage what we Chinese don't want to have, greed. Trade, merchants get money by the filthy means of buying low and selling high. That's their opinion, by the way, not mine. Theirs. Understand? I mean, I'm trying to get you to understand their mindset. They made, oh yeah, these big ships they built, 400 long sailing vessels, they allowed them all to rot in the harbors and sink. Their trips to the New World, to California, there's nothing there that we want. Actually, there was a lot in California they might have wanted. They quit going. Bottom line is, the philosophers are credited with having told the people that the way to happiness is through developing good morals. And folks, I can't say enough about good morality, but there's other things. Like, how do you get the electric clock to work? Europeans invented not the electric clock. How do you get a mechanical clock to work? Europeans invented a mechanical clock. Very important, because the mechanical clock led to the invention of the automobile that came later. The only thing about making gears, folks, I mean, I tried it when I was a kid. You have to get a round wheel, then you have to get every one of the teeth to be of equal length. And then the next gear has to have the right ratio and have to have all the teeth. And if you're not careful, you come to this side, oops, this doesn't fit. And probably none of you tried this, but I did. Tried to draw a gear to where all the teeth would eventually be the right size and the right fit. And then, in the case of a clock, you have to have another gear that has a ratio of 60 to 1, because the ratio of seconds to minutes is 60 to 1, of minutes to hours. The hour hand has to go around a whole revolution. Well, I mean, probably the minute hand has to go around a whole revolution, while the hour hand moves 1/12 the way around. The ratio is 12 to 1. You get these ratios in the gear arrangement, and the gears have to all mesh together. Europeans managed to do that. The Chinese, you know, that's not important. It is important. As a result, the Chinese never developed technology. I mean, not advanced. And to think, I mean, they made more inventions than anyone else, as far as invention would start them on the path. But then they got so far and they quit. All right, if any of you know anything more about this than I do, your comments are welcome. You're welcome to speak up. If any of you heard any of this, of course, I also said earlier, I think that the way they treated the women had a lot to do with them not making advances also. Technological progress was stifled. Inventiveness was stifled. Their big ships they built were allowed to rot. They're believed to be 450 feet long. Now, by any chance, did any of you watch the Bill Nye and Ken Ham debates of more than a year ago, about 19 months ago? Did you ever see them? Basically, during a debate, Bill Nye said, my ancestors built a 300-foot ship. See, the question was, the ark was 450 foot long, and he said a wooden ship 450 foot long can't be built. Well, the Chinese apparently built a lot of them. And in Alexander the Great's day, the Greeks also built a 450 foot long wooden ship. It can be done if you use the right kind of wood. The Chinese use teak wood, which they harden by burying it several feet underground. For one of these days, I'll learn to turn that thing on. So anyway, it's 9:30. Anyway, they buried it underground to where when they brought it up years later, this wood would be very, very, very hard. And they could build a wooden vessel that would be 450 foot long. And Ken Ham argued it could be done. Bill Nye said, my ancestors built one that was 300 foot long, but the one that was 300 foot long, his ancestors built, actually floated for 12 years. All right, leaving that, Chinese, again, they were on the way, folk, but they stopped. It was left to the Europeans to take their inventions, especially the printing press. I mean, the Europeans copied the printing press from the Chinese. Someone went to China like Marco Polo and learned how it was done. Europeans also copied gunpowder from the Chinese. And then they learned eventually how to make silk. Eventually the Europeans learned how to grow cotton. And they learned how to make steel. They learned how to produce steel in large quantities. That led to an industrial revolution. Except for after Mao Zedong died, China never had an industrial revolution. All right. All told, again, these were people who started out and they almost did. But they're philosophers in trying to determine how can we better ourselves? How can we become more moral people? Okay, all of which we should ask. But you didn't ask questions like, can we ever invent a machine that can fly? Can we invent a machine that can talk to another person hundreds and thousands of miles away? Can we build a satellite that will go to Pluto and take pictures of Pluto and beam them back to Earth? They never asked those questions. And folks, these things are important. The result was, I cannot say truthfully that they really improved their morality. They only thought they did. But they certainly did not improve themselves technologically. And they wound up, instead of going out and conquering the Europeans, they wound up being partially conquered by Europeans, not by America, but by Britain, France, Russia, Germany, and maybe the Dutch. There were 5 European nations that got involved in partitioning them up. They wound up being conquered. Then eventually Japan came in, and Japan almost conquered them, all of which they brought on themselves. They had the population, folk. They had the initial inventions. They could have done it, and they almost did. But they got hijacked along the way. By not developing themselves technologically, by not developing themselves economically. They started to. Now, one thing I did not mention about Buddha, then I'll probably go ahead and move on to the next chapter. Again, folks, as I say this, I realize there might be Buddhists in this class. If you are, that's your privilege. But my observation is that Buddhism, everywhere it goes, it tends to discourage industriousness, hard work. And where it goes, it makes the people more contemplative, more meditative, and more willing to just accept what is as the will of the gods somehow. Just accept what will be, and we can do nothing about it. And discourages a person from taking charge and, hey, I can make my own destiny. I can choose my own destiny. I can choose my own path. And I can make this wrong right. I can make this adversity better if I try hard enough. Buddhism doesn't teach that. It teaches when adversity comes your way, just accept it. If you fall flat on your face, just stay down there. That's the way that God's meant it to be. Just stay on your face. Don't try to get up. That's what comes across to me about Buddhism. And wherever it's been, it's led to societies that have, again, not advanced, not moved up. All right, now one other thing I'll throw in, your book doesn't mention. It is known that Christianity did try to go into China, and did go into China as early as 100 years after Christ's birth. People from the Middle East carried it. Actually, the Assyrians claimed they carried it. Wave after wave of Christian missionaries did go into both China and Mongolia, but they never got far. One book I read said that one of the problems is that Europeans did not send their princes. If they'd have sent royalty, they might have been able to make some inroads with the Chinese royalty or nobility, but they only sent the poor among the missionaries, and the poor just simply could not get anywhere talking to kings. But they know in Europe, Christianity converted its kings, is what they're saying. In China, they made converts among the poor, and in Japan, even a little bit among the nobility. But Christianity made no headway in China, and one of the reasons was Christianity was looked on as being a foreign religion. China rejected all foreign religions, all foreign philosophies, until the year 1949 when they accepted Karl Marx, and Karl Marx was as foreign as anything they could have accepted. Karl Marx was a British person, a Jew at that, a Jewish person who at one time studied in a theological seminary, at one time planned to go into ministry, but then became an out-and-out atheist. But they embraced Marxism. All right. But yeah, Christianity is known to have gone into China and fizzled. Okay, with that, again, the class has been quiet. I want to say most of what I've taught you this morning is stuff I never learned in school. And I'm so glad when we say we're teaching world history, we're teaching world history and not the history of Europe, because I'd never heard of Jusi or Yang Wang Mang until I started teaching. And again, that was, I guess, due to the fact well, at University of Tennessee, all they taught was Western Civ. They didn't teach world history as such. Just Western civilization, that was called world history. And my teacher was supposed to have taught Chinese history, and he skipped that chapter. He skipped a chapter on India, skipped a chapter on China, and only talked about Western civilization, Greece, Rome, medieval Europe, and the West, and skipped over that. All right, moving on to chapter 11, what little time we have left. Japan, Korea, Vietnam. Oh yeah, one more thing before I leave China. Many, many years ago, I was introduced to Chinese restaurants. All right, I dated a girl some 29 years ago who liked Chinese food. And when we went to the Chinese restaurant, I was impressed by the music. The music, those seemed to me to just go on and 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 on. No beginning, no end. The song just, I got the idea, is this what the Chinese think of their civilization? It's all the same, generation after generation, year after year, year after year, generation upon generation, same. The Chinese, in your book says, it's valued continuity or sameness over change. And this was one of the big downfalls also. Change is essential, change is necessary, and change is something we cannot be afraid of. Continuity, to a certain extent, yes, but we have to be willing to adapt. Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. China became known as the Middle Kingdom. Middle of what? With Japan to the east, Korea to the east, and Vietnam to the south, Mongolia to the north, and Tibet to the west. China was in the middle. Anyway, with Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, we'll start off Wednesday talking first about Japan, then go from there to Korea and then Vietnam. And one thing I want to impress upon you, all three of these nations were involved in wars with the United States in the 20th century, with Vietnam actually coming out on top. And in the case of the Vietnamese, they fought the United States the same way they had fought the Chinese, and the same way they fought the French, and the same way they fought the Mongolians, by using guerrilla tactics, because their geography is so suited to that. They could hit you and then disappear into the thick foliage. Hit you and disappear. Korea, they are divided today. They've been divided throughout most of their history. They still are. Vietnam has been divided throughout a lot of its history also. Today it's united. As for Japan, they've always been united. All right, with that, folks, everybody have a good couple of days. And it looks like the rain is going to be with us for a while, so hopefully you won't get flooded out. I'll see you on Wednesday, I hope. I wish I could give points to those of you who are here.
We have class Monday?
Monday of next week?
Yes.
Yes, we do.